Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining our second Thursdays for Justice series, Opening Doors in America, the ADA, and what it means to you and me. I'm Mike Flanagan, and I'm the chair of the Social Action Committee here at Salem, and we are truly excited about having you join us tonight. I'm honored to introduce my friend, the Honorable Tony Coelho. Tony is a retired U.S. Congressman from California, a former House Representative Majority Whip, a Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee Chairman, and the principal author of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Diagnosed with epilepsy when he was only 22 years old, Tony spent his entire adult life helping advance the lives of people with disabilities. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Tony Coelho. Tony, you're on mute.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight and meet all of you wonderful folks. I've said when I heard that display of individuals lauding me that it's not very often that somebody gets to hear their eulogy before they die. And so it was very nice of all these individuals to raise money for the Bazelon Center, which is a group that I feel strongly about. Let me just go through a little bit of background of why I'm so passionate. Disability is my ministry, it's my passion. It has been said that I have worked on disability issues for 40 years, and I'm still very involved. I have epilepsy, as was said. I still have seizures. I've had seizures for 60 years. Just a few weeks ago, I had a grand mal seizure. So I'm still very much involved with the disability community as a result of my own restrictions. Um, I grew up on a dairy farm, excuse me, dairy farm in Central California. And one day we were driving on a canal bank and a pickup flipped over in a canal. I hit my head on the windshield and I had a headache when I got out of the pickup, but nothing else. I didn't hurt anywhere. Nothing was wrong with me. I then continued milking cows every day and doing what you normally do as a high school kid. And then a year later, I was in the barn milking and I woke up and I was in my bed in the house. And my brother had carried me into the house. I had just had what we called in a passing out spell. And I was out for a while. And when I woke up, a doctor was there with my parents. I could hear what they were saying, but I couldn't say anything. And what I didn't hear is that the doctor told my parents that he thought that I had epilepsy. I just had a seizure. Now, my parents wouldn't accept the fact that I had epilepsy because, as devout Catholics and as Portuguese Americans, they were always taught that if you have epilepsy, that you're possessed by the devil. Now, what I do when I speak publicly is that I say, my Republican friends know I'm possessed, but to have your family say you're possessed is a lot different. But anyway, they refused to accept it. So they took me to two other doctors. As a 17-year-old, the doctors don't talk to you, they talk to your parents, right? So I didn't know what the doctors had said. One thing my parents said, they thought it was a lack of calcium, different things. And so after the third doctor, they took me to witch doctors. And I don't know if any of you ever been to a witch doctor, but it's one heck of an experience. You go into a dark room, they light candles around the room, pour hot oil on your head and pour hot oil on your chest. And then they pray, talk, whatever in tongues that I'd never heard. And they get through and you're supposed to have the evil spirits leave you. Well, it didn't work with the first one. It didn't work with the second one. We went to the third one. And this individual said what I should do is I had to put a raw egg under my armpit, hold it there for 30 minutes while he did his prayers and so forth. And that when he got through, you had to see if the egg was black. If it was, then the evil spirits had left. If it wasn't, they hadn't left. Well, after that experience, I told my parents I would never go to another witch doctor, and I didn't. Um, and reason I tell you all that is because stigma for those of us with disabilities is a big issue. People perceive something about us that is not true. And so my parents, that was my first uh, episode of stigma. And I will point out stigma in my life's journey. So I then continued to have these passing out spells. And a year later, I wanted to go to college, and I went away uh, from Central California to Los Angeles to Loyola Marymount University. And I loved it there. It was a Catholic school. I learned a lot about myself coming from a public school in a very small town and so forth to a large town and for me, a big university. But I learned a lot about myself when Kennedy got assassinated. It hit me really hard. And I decided that instead of trying to become a trial lawyer, I was going to become a Catholic priest. Well, the Jesuits at Loyola were excited that I was going to be joining the priesthood. I was student body president, outstanding senior, good grades, and so forth. They were all excited about it. They made a big public announcement and so forth. I then went to the doctor for my physical, and the doctor did some tests and so forth. And then he said to me, have you ever heard the word epilepsy? And I said, no. And he said, well, let me tell you about it. So then he described what epilepsy was. I told him about what I'd gone through, my experiences. He said, let me tell you why your parents did X. And so then he tells me about the culture and so forth. And so he said, I'll give you some medication that will help reduce the severity of your seizures. Will not cure you, but it'll help you as you move along. Well, I was thrilled because for 3 years there, well, actually close to 5 years, I've been having these passing out spells, not knowing when they're going to happen, where they're going to happen, what they were, and so forth. So it was a relief to me to have somebody say what they were. And then he said, and I have some good news for you. This was 1964, and a lot of you know what was happening then. It was Vietnam. And he said, the good news is you're 4F, and you'll not have to serve in Vietnam. He said, the bad news is that the Catholic Church in 400 AD changed canon law to say that individuals with epilepsy or possessed by the devil cannot be priests. So you won't be allowed to go in the seminary. Well, to me, I found out what my problem was. So I couldn't go in the ministry. That's okay. I had a lot of job offers. I would pursue those. Now stigma again. I went to these job offers, filled out the applications. The word epilepsy was on all of them. I checked the box. I never got an interview. I must have gone to 20 or 30 of them. I didn't get an interview. Every time I was denied an interview, it ate me up to some extent. I started drinking a lot, and I was drunk every day by 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I thought that everything I'd ever loved in my life had turned against me. My parents, my God, my church. And I then became suicidal, and I had given up. And so one day I'm on the hill where I got drunk every day, and a voice came over me. And the voice said, there was a merry-go-round in the bottom of the hill, and the voice said, you're going to be just like those little kids getting on and off that merry-go-round. You're never going to let anybody or anything stop you from doing what you want to do. That had a huge impact on me. I can still hear that voice. And I don't get drunk. I drink, but I don't get drunk. I've never been suicidal again. I've never been depressed again. I really got my mojo back. I felt good about myself that I was able to overcome what I was going through. A week later, and see, that's another example of stigma, what I went through there. A week later, a priest friend of mine said, I have an opportunity for you. And he said, it's an opportunity to live with Bob Hope and his family. Now, to a lot of audience, I have to say, you don't know who Bob Hope is, and I have to describe who Bob Hope is. But looking around the screen, I don't think I have to say that to all of you. But I went to live with he and his family, traveled with him, had meals, did the whole thing. My bedroom was in their home and so forth. And it was one of the most wonderful experiences a young kid from a small town dairy farm could ever have. And he one day said to me, we were driving, he was driving, and we were out, and he said, listen, your problem is that you think you have a ministry and you think it only can be practiced in a church. You're wrong. A true ministry is practiced in sports and entertainment and business and government. And where you belong is in politics. Well, I've been in politics and student government and so forth, but I never thought about being in politics. But I thought about it. I wrote a letter to my congressman who I didn't know. And lo and behold, he was looking for somebody young with an agriculture background because he represented the area that I grew up in. And I just fit the bill, kind of lucky. So I got the job. Mr. Hope was not pleased because he said, why are you going with somebody that is not famous? I could have got you in with anybody that you wanted to. But I said I wanted to go with my member of Congress. I started off as a file clerk and a robo operator. And some of you might know what a robo operator was. It's the precursor to the computer. And what you did is you typed on a green tape that was about an inch and a half wide. You typed the letter on there, and then you would send that tape through the machine and would type all these letters. And if the tape broke, you had to redo it all over again. So the tape would break. And so I would do that every night until 10 or 11 o'clock at night, because it was Vietnam and all these letters were coming in. We had to put out all these letters. That's how I started, making $6,000 a year, barely covering the apartment that I had and so forth. But it was a wonderful experience to drive up to the Capitol and feel like you were part of something. So I worked hard at it. I ended up becoming his chief of staff and working on a lot of different issues. I had seizures. His attitude about my seizures was, leave him alone. When it's over with, he'll be tired. Give him some water, and then he'll go back to work. And he didn't stop giving me assignments. He didn't worry about if I would have a seizure at some place. One time we were in the middle of about 20 different members of Congress, and he was leading this group and I was staffing it, and I had a seizure in front of him. It didn't bother him at all. He just said, leave him alone. He'll be fine. Just having a seizure. He has epilepsy and so forth. So I found, in effect, with Mr. Sisk, a father, somebody who understood me and supported me. And that was huge for me. When he decided to retire, he wanted me to take his place. So I had been communicating with a lot of people in the district a lot. And so I ran, became the Democratic nominee. During the election in October, just before the November election, in about mid-October, my Republican opponent is at a dinner party. And he says to the group, he said, I don't know if you know it or not, but Tony's a very sick man. He has epilepsy. And what would you think if he went to the White House to argue a critical issue for us, such as water, and had a fit, or had a seizure, had a seizure. So the reporter heard about this, called me the next day and said, what's your reaction? And God was with me, because I'm not that clever, but I immediately responded. I said, well, in the 14 years that I was a staffer in Washington, I knew a lot of people who went to the White House and had fits. At least I'd have an excuse. And that killed it. Nobody's ever used my epilepsy against me again. Um, so anyway, I realized then that one of the things I had to do was take care of my constituents, agriculture and water issues, Central California, the big things. But my contract with my constituents was that I would do everything I can to help them. But the one issue that I felt strongly about was disabilities. And I wanted to pursue things in line with disabilities. And so I offered a lot of amendments to legislation and realized that, it didn't do any good because we in the disability community did not have our basic civil rights. And, people of color got theirs in the 60s. Women got theirs in the 70s. The gay community got theirs in the 90s. We in the disability community had never been included in civil rights legislation. So I started thinking about that and working on it. And there was a grassroots group it actually started in California, University of California, Berkeley. And Justin Dart, who was a person in a wheelchair, very prominent Republican, and he was working with grassroots and so forth. And Ronald Reagan was president, and he had a group working with him to try to come up with something. And so I worked with him and I worked with others and so forth and came up with legislation. And when I introduced it, I sent out a dear colleague letter to a lot of folks to co-sponsor it with me. And you'd be amazed at the response that I got. From liberals, conservatives, men, women, didn't make any difference. They came up to me and said, Tony, I don't like the way my wife, my husband, my son, my daughter, my next door neighbor is treated because they have a disability. So I want to join you on the bill. Now, I have to tell you honestly, they didn't read the bill. They just knew that the bill dealt with discrimination on disability and they joined up. So we got 50 some co-sponsors on the bill at that point. The next, that the Congress ended, so I reintroduced it the next time. I'm the Democratic whip, so that's the third most influential person on the Democratic side of the Congress. And the speaker came to me one day and said, Tony, that bill of yours is too big. It impacts too many people, and I think we have to cut it down and hold it back a bit and so forth. And you can offer different bills and I'll help you with those. And as the third ranking member, I felt that I could, sort of say what I wanted to say. And I said, no, sir, I will not do that. It's got to go all the way. So then he assigned it to 7 different committees and about 12 different subcommittees to slow it down and to hold it back. We came up with a strategy to go with the most favorable subcommittee, and then we moved it through all the subcommittees and the committees and so forth. When we got to the floor, it passed overwhelmingly. We had problems, of course, but passed overwhelmingly. In the Senate, the sponsors of it in the Senate were Senator Ted Kennedy, Bob Dole, Tom Harkin, and Orrin Hatch, a very conservative Republican from Utah. And he's a Mormon. And he said to me one time when I was testifying before his committee, he said, Tony, I will do anything I can to help you. In my church, you're an angel of God. And so we had his total support, which was really critical because we did not want it to be a partisan bill. We wanted it bipartisan. And so it passed the Senate quite easily, went to the White House. President Bush now was the president, Papa Bush, as I call him. And he was the president. What people don't know is that he had a daughter who died of a disability at an early age. And so he was very strongly in favor. Some of his staff was trying to get him to veto it, but he wouldn't do it. And so he signed it, big ceremony. Then the next story is another stigma in that the Supreme Court, finally, bill goes up to the Supreme Court after a few years, and they decide that this bill only applied to people with physical disabilities and not any other disability. So, look at, I helped write it. So basically they were telling me that you're pretty dumb. You didn't include yourself and others. So what we did is then we met and we decided that we were going to override the Senate, the Supreme Court, which is not a usual thing to do. But we then put in legislation, the ADA Amendments Act, and we pushed it through. We got through real quickly. We overrode the Supreme Court and become the law of the land. I just want to close with one story, and that is that people ask me if I'm still a Catholic or still religious and so forth. And I say, absolutely. That didn't, what the church didn't stop me at all. When I became the Democratic whip, I got to take a delegation to different countries. And as a Portuguese American, the highest ranking Portuguese American, I wanted to go to Portugal. It'd be a state visit, red carpet, dinner, all that stuff. And then the State Department wanted me to go to Morocco because the king was working with the Portuguese on the Middle East. So I agreed to go. And then my third choice was I wanted to go to the Vatican, and I wanted to meet with the Pope John Paul. And they arranged it. So we get there, we're all sitting down in one of the rooms at the Vatican. The Pope walks in, we stand up, he sits down, everybody sits down. Now I go to the podium. Now I have an attitude about a podium. A podium can be any time that you have the control of an audience where they're listening to. That's a podium. It can be steel, it can be wood, it can be you just standing up, whatever. So I go to this wooden podium and I read a pre-approved, very boring speech, but it was approved by the Vatican and the State Department. When I get through with it, I said, Your Holiness, I could not live with myself if I didn't say something personal. Now, at that moment, all of his minions around the room are going, I could hear him. My delegation was looking at me as if I was nuts. And my wife, I had not told her, I did not tell anybody I was going to do this. So I said, Your Holiness, as a young man, I decided I want to become a Catholic priest. I was denied entry because canon law established in 400 AD said if you have epilepsy or possessed by the devil, you can't be a priest. I think that's very unchristian of our church, and I wish you'd look into it. He didn't say anything. He got up and gave his very boring speech. And afterwards, we took a bunch of pictures and so forth and so on, $5 a photo, of course. And then that was it. We're walking out of my wife and I are escorting the door. He's holding her hand. We get to the door. He turns to her, blesses her. He turns to me and does not bless me. Well, if you're Catholic and the Pope doesn't bless you, that means you're going straight down someplace. And so I was a little bit surprised. He says to me, young man, I heard your comments, and turns around and walks away. Well, I didn't know what to think, to be very honest. I was a little hurt that he didn't bless me, but he did talk to me, and so I felt good about that. The good news is that 2 years later, canon law was changed to permit individuals with epilepsy to become priests. Now, I want to say very carefully, I do not take credit for it. What I do take credit for is that I spoke up to him. I speak to power, and I said what I said. It may have had an impact. They may have done, somebody else may be involved or whatever. I don't know, but I know what I did. And so I feel good about that. So the reason I tell that story is that I feel very strongly that those of us with disabilities need to be willing to speak to power to make a change. I've spoken to power to the previous 5 presidents and on issues dealing with disabilities. I'm not afraid to speak up for these issues. So thank you very much for having me today. I appreciate Michael inviting me to participate in this event. I've read a lot about your church and I'm very, very impressed. My partner and I both will probably attend one of your sessions, one of your services one of these days. So thank you, and I'm open to any questions that anybody may have.
Thanks, Tony. We have a question from the Greens. In gaining the support of other members of Congress, what strategy did you pursue to win their hearts and minds?
Basically, I told them what I just told you. I basically said that I had been discriminated against by my own family, by my church. And I didn't, as I said to them, is that I don't think they did it out of hate or spite or anything else. Um, in regards to my family, they did it out of love. They wanted to protect me, wanted to protect me from others. They wanted to make sure I didn't get hurt. But they hurt me a lot when they prevented me from doing things. They didn't want me to go in the public much because they didn't want me to have a seizure in public. And the reason why is that under a lot of cultures, Portuguese culture, but a lot of cultures, that God was punishing a family by me having a seizure. Didn't mean I did something wrong necessarily, but it was somebody in the family had done something significant as a sin, and that God was punishing the family. That's a heavy burden for my family to have to carry, or for any family to have to carry. So my mother would prevent me from doing things that my brothers did and did not do. And just a quick story, when she died, I had to decide as the body was going into the ground, something came over me and told me that I had to decide whether I loved her or respected her. And I don't know why, but that's what happened. And I decided as the casket was going down that I loved her, but I did not respect her. And I immediately had a seizure. And I still think about that moment, but it's that I knew she loved me, but boy, she put me through hell, and it really hurt. And those scar tissues are still there.
Thank you. We have a question from Emily. How do you feel about the way that the ADA has changed the lives of people with developmental disabilities?
Thank you. It has helped all of us with disabilities, and that there are not enough is doing for different groups of the disability community, but you have to understand the ADA is a civil rights law. It's not a jobs, it's not a education bill, it's civil rights. Basically, it gives those of us with disabilities the right to sue to get our rights, or the right to have the government sue folks to get our rights. In other words, the government can sue states, can sue cities, can sue corporations, can go after a group of individuals if they're violating the ADA. It's now the law of the land in over 50 different countries. So it's moved around the world. And so on developmental disabilities, it's basically having the same rights that the rest of us in the disability community have. There are special problems, of course, and those are things that we try to work in different legislation. But the ADA is a civil rights bill, not much more you can do about it. In the last Congress, there was an attempt to gut it. It passed the House, but we killed it in the Senate. And I don't see it going anywhere in this House or this Senate. It's not as bipartisan as it used to be, which is sad, but that's sort of the way the world is today. But anyway, I feel strongly that we'll be able to maintain the ADA for a long time, and I'm committed my life to making sure that happens.
Thank you, Tony. Cheryl has a question. It's easy to see how far we've come in terms of stigma, especially with mental illness. How far do we still have to go?
We have to go a long way on mental illness, for example, and on a lot of disabilities. Going through COVID, it's been one heck of an experience for a lot of us. For example, 25 different states in the last year during COVID basically said in providing healthcare to individuals who had COVID, that those of us with disabilities were at the end of the line. We were the last ones to be taken care of. 25 different states in this country. And a lot of you would think that would become in the so-called red states. That's not true. In the state of Washington, we had a huge problem. Pennsylvania, we had some problems, and so forth. So we took it on in different states because they were violating the ADA, in my view. And we took it on and we reversed it in several states. So the stigma, the problem we have still exists. There are people who one individual who's very involved in this current administration wrote an article one time in the Sunday magazine, New York Times, and he said that basically those of you who have disabilities and you're 75 years old, you do not have a value for assistance or anything. Um, uh, that's the type of thing we still fight, and I have been fighting him, and I think we beat him in regards to the position of this current administration. But it was a fight, and it's sad to me that in this day and age that we still have people who discriminate against those of us with disabilities. But it's there, and it's all because of stigma, and I believe that so firmly. And that what that means is that those of us with disabilities have to speak out. We have to take an opportunity to talk whenever we can. That's why I accepted Michael's invitation. Not that you folks discriminate, but it's hopefully that you will talk to others and realize that it is still a problem today. And for those of us with disabilities, all we want is an opportunity to participate in society like everybody else. We don't want a gift. We're not looking for anything we just want the right to be able to be fired, which means we have to be hired in order to be fired. So we want the right to be fired. We want the right to pay taxes. I don't know many groups in this country who want to pay taxes, but if we're paying taxes, that means we have a job. So we are an aggressive group that now is coming out of our shadow and willing to speak up. For so many years, what would happen is that people who loved us would pat us on the head and say, go in the corner, we're going to take care of you. We're not doing that anymore. We're not going to go in the corner. We're going to speak up. We're going to be part of decision making. And when Obamacare was passed, I was very insistent that in this research group called PCORI that was set up, that we had to be at the table. In other words, what happens in all these decisions making, people will come, what's wrong? What can I do to help? And then they go in the room, close the door, and make a decision. I think we should be at the table, not controlling the table, just be a voice at the table when decisions are being made. And so we got statutorily a member of the board who has to be somebody with disability representing the disability community. And so I'm doing that right now with the Biden administration and getting people with disabilities in different jobs. And we just got somebody on the Domestic Policy Council, which is the council that approves all policy decisions that this administration is involved in. We have, I'm getting too excited here. We have never had anybody in a position like that. We've never had anybody at the White House representing our community. And we got a person with a disability on the Domestic Policy Council, and her title is Director of Disability Policy. And so she's at the table of decision-making policy for this administration, a major breakthrough for us. But we're doing that in different areas. And hopefully we can get around this thing. Now, I want to be very honest. Look at civil rights law was passed in the 60s for people of color. I think all of you would agree that that has not solved the problems in regards to people of color. In the 70s, women got your rights to on a lot of things. But do you think that women have the same rights as men and everybody else? No. And then the gay community got their rights in the 90s. And obviously, they're not fully engaged and participatory and so forth. So we in the disability community have a long fight ahead of us, and we know that. But we have to fight and educate in order to make sure that that stigma goes away.
Thank you. Tony, we have a question from Ellen Green. My daughter is a little person, and although she is legally protected through the ADA, she still experiences silent discrimination. She does very well on the phone and or through Zoom job interviews, but has been in some awkward final in-person interviews with company officials, seeing that she is only 4 feet tall. How do we, as a society, encourage inclusion where everyone belongs?
That's a great question. I was just on the phone with 2 other individuals One of them is a little person. She's very influential politically, and she just got hired by the Ford Foundation to handle a portfolio on disability. Ford is never, one of the largest foundations in the United States, has never been involved with disabilities. And Darren Walker, who's the president, said to me personally, look, we've ignored the disability community. Our facilities are not accessible. We've never given any money to a disability group. And so he got very involved. He did it publicly in a public letter that he acknowledged mistakes. And so this person has now been hired by him to handle disability issues with a lot of money to help out organizations. So, and she's helping me in regards to getting people into the administration. She's well known and very influential with this administration. So we're making progress. Individuals, little people have really started to make some inroads. I am so sorry that you are getting discriminated against, but I would suggest one thing. If you will give your name and a little bit of information to Michael, I will personally help you in regards to somebody that I'm chair of a group that places people with disabilities and would help place you in a job with your particular situation not being a factor. So I'm happy to help out, give the information to Michael, and Michael knows how to get a hold of me.
Thanks, Tony. We have a question from Melinda. It's a long one, so bear with me. Can you speak about the universal design and how we might change mindsets regarding the ADA being something we do to support those with disabilities when universal design supports those with and without disabilities? I'm particularly thinking about how readily available universal design is today and yet so seldom put into use. For example, why isn't closed caption universally used? Why must it be requested or set up?
A great question. And I agree with your premise and your conclusion. Universal design is there. It could be used much more aggressively. The way we go about it is to take action against builders, developers, whatever, who don't include people with disabilities. It would be very difficult to mandate it by law. I'd be very supportive of doing it because I take the view that when you do something, if it's universally designed, then it's acceptable to everybody, able-bodied and disabled. Homes should be that way. And you take Apple. Apple's devices are all at the design stage inclusive of people with disabilities. And there's no instructions, as any of you who have any Apple devices, they basically assume that you will check in to find out how it's done. But if you go any Apple device, the design stage, you don't have to have an accommodation. The design stage takes care of your needs. But more and more companies need to do that. And it is happening. It's slow, but it's happening. But it is something that I would hope there is some way that we could push and if possible, legislate, but it'd be difficult in this day and age to get something like that passed.
Thank you. We have another question here. The most visible manifestation of the ADA are things like carve outs, the electric door openers, and the like. What are some of the lesser known protections and benefits?
Well, one thing, if you go to an airport and you pick up a phone, all of a sudden there's a volume control. That was put there for people who are hearing impaired. But you know who uses it? me and other people who aren't hearing impaired because of the noises and so forth. Most accommodations are now used by people who don't have a disability. Let's take the curb cuts that were just mentioned. Go to a street corner anywhere in any city and watch who uses the curb cut. It's mothers and fathers with their babies in strollers. It's men and women delivering goods to the stores on that block. It is the elderly who it's easier to get on the sidewalk as a result of the curb cut. It's the young kids with their rollerblades and roller skates and so forth that I wish they didn't use, but they use it because it's easier to get on a deal. That's an accommodation for those of us with disabilities. But it's a universal thing now. Everybody uses it. But I can go on and on about, the hearing device. I can go on which I talked about with Apple and what they've done. You can go to Apple and you can enlarge your font. You can do anything you want. You can do things that are designed for those of us with disabilities, but it's an accommodation for everybody. And I can go on and on about the different examples that are happening. That's what's exciting to me, is that a lot of companies now realize the more we speak up as a disability community, more and more companies realize that there is a big audience out there that wants to use their product or use their device if they only make them accessible. And so it's that fight and that education that we have to do. I started a group that now is called Disability In. And it's made up of companies that recognize the need to deal with people with disabilities, their products and hiring people with disability and so forth. Started that, I would say 25 years ago. It's a huge company now, a huge organization now, Disability In. And it's basically the good housekeeping seal of approval of a company that has met a certain standard. And so those companies are making changes individually in regards to their companies. But if you go around, there's so many things now that are designed for our community that are now used as accommodations for everybody else.
Thanks, Tony. Based off the size of the group, I'm going to give you the opportunity to take yourself off of mute and ask questions directly to Tony. In the meantime, we have a question here. I've had severe postpartum depression after my son was born in 2000. Even with all the progress that has been made, I still feel there is a stigma around mental health. What more do you think can be done?
I'm sorry about that. But let me tell you that we recognize the issue. The Bazelon Center, that this program that some of you saw before getting on this program, Bazelon Center is the center on mental health. They lead the effort. We have worked hard in regards to dealing with that. For example, anytime that there is a shooting in a school or any type of facility, immediately people say that it was somebody with mental illness, just immediately. No questions. It's just not true. But that is the perception that people have, and we have to fight back on it. And we have. We're constantly fighting on that. But it is immediately what people think. And so that's the stigma that I keep talking about. And the only way that we can turn that around is to talk about it, is to be honest about it, deal about it, be upfront about it. People tell me, Tony, why do you say you have a disability? You know why? Because you asked me that question. That's why. And so it's just that in mental illness in particular, it's a difficult one because the stigma is so strong. And the only way we get there is by people willing to be out front. For example, Michael Phelps, the Olympic swimmer, has been so open about his depression. That's what we need. Michael Phelps is one of the greatest athletes this country's ever had. But he talks about his depression. He talks about his mental illness. And as a result of that, other prominent people now have come out. That's why I talk about if we speak up, other people will follow. Other people will talk about their disability. And that's what we need to do, because the more we get people to talk about it, particularly people that have an image among their groups. I love having more and more athletes talk about it, but movie stars, singers, prominent individuals like the CEOs who talk about they're bipolar or they have other issues. The more people talk about it, they humanize then our disabilities, and we eat away at the stigma. But it's a real problem. Mental health is one of the biggest ones. I work with the Bazelon Center a lot, and I appreciate their acknowledgement of that. But I work with it a lot because mental health is one of the really, really big ones.
Thank you, Tony. A question from Peyton. What changes / improvements would you most like to make, if you could, to the ADA?
I have to answer it this way: none. And the reason I say that is because I don't want to open up the ADA, because I'm afraid that the Congress would eat away at it in a negative way. And so I'm very protective, to be quite honest. I'm unwilling to support, and I fight very hard when people try to. When the House opened it up this in the last Congress, they basically tried to destroy the ADA. And that's what I'm afraid of. We no longer have that feeling politically to work together to solve problems. There's real issues there. But let me tell you what things that I'd like to see that's different, but I wouldn't open it up. You know, for example, I'm working on an issue right now that every 6 months there's a group that checks the internet and checks companies that have websites and so forth, and to see if they're accessible. And this group is nonpartisan and so forth. It's not, it's a pro bono group, very credible. Every 6 months they come out with an analysis. And in the latest that came out in, I think it was June or July of last year, said that 98.2% of all websites are not accessible. And so the fight there is that one of the pizza companies did not want to make their site accessible. So there was a lawsuit. They fought it. They lost it at the lower courts. They lost it at the appellate court. It then went to the Supreme Court last year. And the Supreme Court reviewed the appellate court decision and decided that the ADA did cover the internet. And as a result of that, I am now pushing the Justice Department under the Biden administration to enforce the law in regards to internet access. So that's something I'm really working on right now. And I think we can make some progress there. But that's the type of thing you got to keep working at. You can't stop. We've got to get over this, got to get around this. And some of these companies fight us all the way. But I just told you about Disability In, which is a group of major companies who are extremely supportive of helping us out. But these groups that go to court and file action against us are the ones that I worry about. In California, there was an attempt on the part of the mall owners to prevent the enforcement of the ADA in their malls. And so what they said is that this little shop couldn't afford to do the ADA enforcement and so forth. Basically, it was that the mall owner was responsible and didn't want to do it. And they worked throughout the country. We basically fought that and beat it back. So that's the problem we're having. We're still in the midst of that whole fight. We're going to win because there's a lot of us, and a lot of us are speaking out. So we're going to get there because we're willing to fight.
Tony, we have a question from Melinda. Melinda?
Hi, Tony. I work as a director of special education. We serve about 4,000 students with disabilities and an additional large group of students with 504 needs. And these services in our schools are woefully underfunded, with 504 services, of course, being completely unfunded. And, we frequently find ourselves with no opportunities that are meaningful for transition to adulthood services for our students with the highest needs. And I'm just wondering if there are any meaningful moves going on at the federal level,
Yes.
behind the scenes that might be in the pathway of addressing those inequities in funding and other disability services?
Yes. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of executive orders that the president has signed to reverse the negatives that have happened in the last 4 years. And we are making appointments now in the education department with people with disabilities so that we can get at this. I would just tell you one thing. Bob Casey, I don't know how many of you know, he's the United States Senator here. He is fabulous on disability issues. He's fabulous on education issues, and he's fabulous on health issues. So if you have a concern, if you contact his office, he will help you out. I mean, he is, I was just talking to one of his top staff guy, that's all he does is disability issues, this staff person. And Bob is on the finance committee, which has control over a lot of these programs. He's the chair of the seniors committee, and he's on the health committee. So he has all these areas, and this person handles disability for him. That's all this person does, Michael Gamel McCormick. And so if you if you try to reach his office and you ask for Michael Gamel McCormick and tell him I asked you to call, he'll take the call, and they will be very helpful. I mean, they're fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Does anyone else have a question for Tony?
Yes, I do. One more, if I can, Michael. I think, yes, Senator Casey, I think he's wonderful working on disabilities. And I was going to ask you, I had done some advocacy work on the ABLE expansion with Senator Casey's office. And I wondered if you could speak to that. I know with everything that's happened now with COVID and all the other issues, it probably is falling off the radar. But I wondered if you were working on that and if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I was very supportive of that, still am supportive of it. As a matter of fact, I spoke at a group for Senator Casey in the Pittsburgh area, and the ABLE Act was one of the big things that was discussed. I don't know all the particulars about it. I don't want to pretend that I do. But Senator Casey is very aggressive on this, and Michael Gamel McCormick is the expert. And so I just can assure you that it's not been forgotten. I can assure you that Michael and Senator Casey are on this, and there is support in the House and the Senate very strongly. And so we should just try to get it back on the radar scope. But talking to Casey's office would be the right thing to do. But he's totally there. He's one of the principal authors, as you know.
Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we have time for one more question. Ellen, did you have a question?
I see Emily over here. Emily, do you have a question? Yes, I'm looking at you.
I was wondering what you thought of the phrase used by autistic advocates, nothing about us without us.
I think it's fabulous. As a matter of fact, it's something I use all the time because, what I was saying about making sure that we have people at the White House in decision-making and so forth. Nothing about us without us. In the past, people would make decisions for us without even asking us. And now we're very strong, and that's our motto. You picked it up, right? And that is our motto. That's what we say all the time. It doesn't mean we're right. It just means we have an opinion, and we want to be able to express our opinion. You may not agree with us, but don't do something without us. You're trying to do something about us without including us, and that's all we want. We're not demanding X, Y, and Z. We're just demanding this, and that you include us in decision making, that you include us when things are being done. Just give us a voice. Just give us a voice. And we think we can convince you why you should do the things that we're concerned about. But if you don't even give us a chance to be at the table, if you don't give us a chance to have a voice, we can never convince you, and we can never change the things that are going on. So Emily, you're right on. I mean, I love you for that. That's exactly what all of us have to say. So thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Ellen, did you have a question to close it out? You have to unmute. Can't hear you. Ellen, we can't hear you. So Ellen's question, if I can try it because we can't hear her, is related to Melinda's question. People with autism often fall through the cracks fall through the cracks when they transition from public education out to the general public. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yes, I do. My partner's niece, who is 35 and functions at probably an 8th grade level. We are very concerned about her future and what she has to go through to participate and so forth. We're very concerned with what happens when her mother and Bob, her uncle, aren't here, and what happens with her. So this is something that I am personally very, very involved in. And I just tell you one thing, that in all the years that I have been involved in the disability community, there's no community more active than the autism community. They are aggressively involved. They speak up. They're not afraid to speak up. When I did the work for Hillary Clinton in developing the disability policy she had, we had people from all parts of the community. The autistic community is split in about 3 different ways, but we had all 3 parts working together in some of the recommendations we had. And then when we put together the program for Obama, the same thing. And now with Joe Biden, we put together the policy, and we had people from the autism community very much on the table involved. So your community is aggressive, and I love them for it. So you're being heard. So Michael, thank you very much for inviting me. This has been great. I hope I didn't go too long on anything there, but I assume you can sense my passion and my ministry in regards to this issue. I feel very strongly about it.
Tony, thank you so much. I was just going to say, I absolutely love your passion. I've known you for years now, but your passion tonight was perfect. So thank you so much. Everyone that joined tonight, thank you very much. On our website at Salem, you can catch these 2 links if you want to learn more about what Tony has done. The Coelho Center at
Loyola.
Well, thank you. Marymount University, the link is here, but we'll also have it on our website, and the Epilepsy Foundation. Both have a lot of information out there, as well as the video that we were showing earlier is out there. And if you would like to make donations to either one of those 2 foundations, you can do so there as well. Tony, again, thank you very much. And I just want to remind everybody here tonight, next month, March 18th, we're doing a shot in the arm, the promise of the coronavirus, presented by Dr. David Rawl, the PhD Chief Academic Officer at Fox Chase Cancer Center. On April 15th, we're doing Bring Me Your Poor and You're Hungry with the attorney from the ACLU. May 20th, we're doing the Pennsylvania Failed Education System. And then on June 17th, we're doing the Magic Year Between the Riots and the First Gay Pride with Mark Segal. So please join us for those upcoming events as well. And you can see more of those on our website as well. Tony, again, thank you so much. Give our love to Bobby, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.